Hello, and welcome to the Respiratory Protection Training for the 55th CERFP. The contents of today's training are intended to comply with OSHA's Respiratory Protection Standard. This training contains information on the CBRN respirator used at the 55th CERFP, specifically the Airbus C420 PAPR system. This training does not include information on filtering face piece respirators, commonly referred to as dust masks or N95s. If CERF personnel are tasked with wearing a dust mask style respirator, additional fit testing and training will be required. Today's training is intended to provide airmen and soldiers assigned to the Minnesota CERFP with information regarding the proper use and maintenance of their respirator. Topics covered will provide respirator users with fundamental knowledge needed to safely enter the hot zone. Because CERF personnel may be called up for a variety of hazards, CERF personnel must be well versed in how their respirator works in order to prevent injury, illness, or death. Respiratory protection plays a critical role in protecting personnel during a CBRN or all-hazard response. Because we're trained to respond during large-scale catastrophic events, it's possible that the PPE you're wearing is your last line of defense for your health and safety. Respirators are designed to protect the user against hazardous materials in the air. The CBRN respirators used with the CERF are designed specifically to remove toxic chemicals, biologicals, and dusts out of the air. However, these respirators do not provide universal protection. The hazards present in the hot zone will determine how you wear and use the respirator. High concentrations of hazards mean that the cartridge on your respirator has a shorter service life. This equates to a shorter time spent in the hot zone. Later in the training, we'll discuss the limitations of cartridges and how that might impact our CERF response. There are two different configurations of the respirator used on the CERF. The first configuration is the face mask and a cartridge. This is typically worn in the cold zone in the event of a wind change that causes a gas situation. This configuration can also be worn in the hot zone depending on the concentrations of the hazards downrange. The technical term for this configuration is a full-face air purifying respirator, but we generally refer to it as a mask. The second configuration includes the mask, blower with a hose, and two cartridges. This configuration is called a powered air purifying respirator, but we tend to refer to it as a PAPR. CERF members need to be aware of the difference between the mask and PAPR configurations. The most important difference is the level of protection. Different respirator styles do a better job preventing hazardous materials from entering through the seal where the mask hits the face. Tight-fitting full-face respirators provide a high level of protection, but its weakness is in the fact that the user has to pull air through the cartridge, which creates a negative pressure inside the mask. If the user has a bad seal on their mask, there's a possibility for hazardous materials to enter through that seal when they're breathing in. The PAPR uses a motor to pull air through the cartridges, then push that cleaned air to the mask. This creates a positive pressure inside the mask. It's similar to when you blow air into a balloon. The positive pressure inside the mask makes it difficult for a hazard outside of the mask to enter through the seals along your face. A key point to remember is that the higher level of protection has to do with the pressurization of the mask, not because the PAPR has an extra cartridge. Which mask you wear in the hot zone will be determined based on the hazards that are present. The decision will be made by the incident commander based on guidance that's provided by the civil support team or preventative aerospace medicine. The type of respirator you wear plays a role in how long you can stay in the hot zone. The CST and PAM team calculate how long teams can remain downrange based on the anticipated concentration of the hazard, the type of respirator that's being worn, and the type of work that's being done. Because our respirators only clean the air, the amount of time a respirator is effective is limited. Personnel who are in the hot zone need to follow turnback guidance in order to prevent respirator failure. If the respirator's cartridge fails, you could be injured or worse. Wearing a PAPR does not mean that you can spend more time in the hot zone. The PAPR pulls more air through the cartridge than the mask alone. This means that the cartridges on the PAPR could actually fail sooner air than the mask. Your turn back time is calculated based off of the respirator configuration you're told to wear, so make sure you're wearing the right one. As was stated earlier, the respirator used by the CERF only cleans the air. However, not all cartridges are created equally. There are no cartridges that clean every possible contaminant. In general, the cartridges available to the CERF cover a wide variety of possible contaminants, primarily chemical warfare agents. Our filters also provide protection against particulates such as biological hazards like anthrax or diseases like the avian flu or COVID-19. Particulate filtration also provides protection against inhalable radioactive particles. The type of cartridge you use in the field will depend on the hazard we respond to. However, there are some conditions where you may not be able to enter a space, even with the respirator. The type of respirators we use do not provide protection against low oxygen environments. This means that oxygen concentrations less than 19% of the overall air could be hazardous to your health. Search and extraction and fatality search and rescue should always check the oxygen before entering a space. Failure to do so could result in injury or death due to low oxygen. By now you understand that the respirator is a critical piece of PPE that could save your life. So how do you know that it'll work when you need it to? The obvious answer is that you need to inspect it. Prior to using your respirator, inspect it for damage or missing parts that could prevent it from functioning correctly. The rubber that touches your face should be flexible. If it's hard, cracked, torn, or has other damage, the mask needs to be replaced. The next thing you need to inspect are the valves. Valves need to be flexible and lay flat against the respirator. Torn valves could result in air entering through the wrong direction, meaning that you could be exposed to the contaminant in the air. There should be a yellow valve at the bottom front of your mask and a black valve where the cartridge screws on. There are also 2 black caps in the nose cup that help prevent the visor from fogging up. Valves can be replaced without throwing out the whole respirator. During inspection, make sure that all 5 of the straps are present, flexible, and can be tightened. Damaged head straps will prevent you from getting a good seal on your mask. Personnel who are entering the hot zone also need to make sure that their PAPR is in good working condition. The first part is checking that the batteries are charged. Without a charged battery, the PAPR won't pressurize the mask. The next step is to check the airflow on the PAPR. To check the PAPR airflow, put the flow gauge on top of the blower, then turn it on. The red ball should rise above the red line on the gauge. Both cartridges need to be installed, and the PAPR should be held so the gauge is directly up from the ground. A common mistake is to test the airflow with only one cartridge. The PAPR is designed to run with air pulling through 2 cartridges. The PAPR will not pressurize your mask effectively if you only have one cartridge on. Another common problem is to check the flow at the end of the hose instead of at the top of the blower housing. The material of the hose causes the air to slow down, so the red ball will not rise as high on the flow gauge. Since the red line on the flow gauge is meant to be used for the top of the blower, testing at the end of the hose could trick you into thinking that your PAPR isn't working correctly when it actually is. Once you've checked the flow on your PAPR, make sure that you check the belt, hose, and blower are in good working condition. There should be no damage, cracks, holes, or breakage. Finally, check that there is a good connection from the blower to the hose and the hose to the mask. Now that you know that your respirator is in good condition, the next thing you need to know is how to properly put it on so that it works correctly. Respirators come in different sizes, so it's important that you wear the respirator size that you've been fit tested on. You cannot switch respirator sizes without getting refit tested. In the event that we're called up for a real-world response, it's important that you replace your training cartridges with real-world cartridges provided by logistics. When putting on or donning your respirator, make sure that there is no hair between the mask and your skin. If we're called up for emergency response, males should make sure to bring enough shaving supplies to ensure a clean-shaven face every day of response. Females should ensure that their hair is pulled back or configured in a way so that the hair does not get into the seals or interfere with the head straps. Buns or ponytails should be low on the head, near the neck, so that the head strap can be tightened to the shape of the head. Bobby pins and clips are not advised as they can get caught during donning and cause injuries to the scalp. Proper donning should be done in the following order. Place the mask on your face, putting the chin in the chin cup, and making sure all sides of the mask are touching the skin of your face. Hold the front of your respirator with one hand, then use the other to pull on the straps. Start by tightening the bottom straps, then tighten the one at the very top. The last straps you should tighten should be the side straps. After tightening the respirator, perform your user seal checks. This is the most important step. Why? Because it will tell you whether or not your mask is going to work the way you expect it to. To do a user seal check, first cover the input on the cartridge and breathe in. This is called a negative pressure seal check. You should feel the mask tighten to your face. You should not feel air coming through the side of the mask. If you feel air coming through, you do not have a good seal and you need to adjust your mask. The next step is to perform the positive pressure seal check. To do this, cover the exhalation valve at the bottom of your mask. This can be a little difficult to do, especially if you have small hands. Once covered, breathe out. You should feel the mask balloon a bit, but you should not feel the air escape through the side of the mask. If air is escaping the side of the mask, then you do not have a good seal and you need to readjust your mask. PAPR users also need to perform seal checks. The PAPR blower should be off and cover the cartridge and breathe in. This is how you perform your negative pressure seal check. You should feel the respirator tighten to your face. After that step, turn the PAPR on. You should feel the mask inflate slightly, but you should not feel air escaping the side of the mask. All air should leave through the front exhalation valve. If you are entering the hot zone, you should recheck your seals after being taped into your hazmat suit to ensure the taping process doesn't affect your respirator seal. Knowing how and when to properly remove your respirator is also important in order to prevent accidental exposures during the removal or doffing process. Respirators should always be the last piece of PPE removed after completing your technical decon. After completing decon, make sure to replace your batteries and recharge the ones you used. In a real-world response, respirator cartridges would need to be replaced after every hot zone entry. This is to ensure that your cartridges have 100% capacity for the next time you enter the hot zone. In the event that you don your respirator for a gas scenario, make sure that you keep the respirator on until you've been given the all clear. In a real world, a change in wind direction may require personnel to decontaminate after the wind change and prior to removing the respirator. For pandemic response, where the respirator is used for protection against potentially infectious individuals, such as COVID-19, the respirator should be decontaminated as much as possible prior to removing the mask. Hand hygiene, such as hand washing or the use of hand sanitizers, is also critical to preventing exposures to this type of hazard. The best way to prevent respirator malfunctions in the hot zone is to perform your user seal checks every time you don your respirator. In the event that you experience a respirator malfunction, you need to radio the issue through your chain of command and return to technical decon immediately. Cartridges should not be changed in the hot zone. One case that would require turnback is experiencing symptoms associated with the known hazards in the hot zone. Symptoms will vary depending on the hazards for the response, so listen carefully to briefings from your leadership. Issues like fatigue and heat stress can be worsened while wearing a respirator. If you experience lightheadedness, nauseousness, dizziness, a lack of alertness, or blurred vision, you need to turn back. Not all hazards have an odor, but some do. The filter on your cartridge should clean the air of smells. This means that smelling something could be an indication that your cartridge is failing. Odors from your own breath are normal, but the smell of chemicals are not. This is another case where turn back is warranted. PAPR battery failure does not mean that you've lost respiratory protection. You'll remember from earlier in the training that the PAPR provides more protection because it's pushing air into your mask. When the battery dies, you'll have to pull air through the cartridges on your own. If you're in the hot zone with a battery failure, the first thing you should do is change the battery if you have a backup. Have a battle buddy or a wingman change the battery while you hold your mask to your face. This will prevent your mask from being jostled while changing the battery. If you do not have a battery backup, you need to radio to your chain of command, and depending on the conditions in the hot zone, you may or may not be cleared to remain in the field. After using your respirator, it's important that you clean it to prevent bacteria from growing inside. Between uses, wipe the respirator down with an alcohol-free respirator cleaning wipe. This cleaning should focus on points where your respirator touches your face, as well as the valves. Cleaning wipes are available from Logistics. At the end of the day, you should do a deep clean of your respirator by sanitizing it with a bleach and water solution, then rinsing it and allowing it to air dry. This cleaning should include all surfaces inside and outside of your respirator, with special attention to the valves. Cleaning tools should be soft and should not have a scratchy or abrasive surface. This is to prevent damage to the lens and valves. This cleaning may not remove leftover tape residue on the outside of the mask. That's okay because tape residue does not affect the overall function of the mask. PAPR users also need to clean their hoses at the end of the day. After washing your mask, make sure you allow it to air dry. Work with Logistics or the PAM team to determine the best way to air dry your mask depending on your operating conditions of the day. Deep cleaning your mask and PAPR components should always be done prior to putting away your red bag at the end of an exercise or deployment. This is also a good time to clean any camelbacks or canteens that you've used. Work with Logistics to determine the best location to air dry your masks after returning to your home station. In order to comply with OSHA requirements, all CERF personnel are required to complete an initial medical questionnaire to determine their ability to wear the respirator safely. After completing their initial medical clearance, an annual screening may be performed in order to identify any changes that could prevent successful respirator use. Pre- and post-entry medical screenings may also be used to catch conditions that would prevent safe respirator use in the field. Medical questionnaires are HIPAA-protected documents that need to be uploaded to your military medical record. Your medical questionnaire is reviewed by a military medical provider. The provider will either clear a CERF member for respirator use, clear them with restrictions, or prohibit respirator use, depending on the member's medical status. The recommendation does not include HIPAA-protected information. CERF personnel must complete an annual respirator fit testing on every size and model respirator they may wear during a response. This is required for OSHA compliance. Only the mask needs to be fit tested. The PAPR blower is an accessory that attaches to the mask and doesn't affect fit. Individuals who are experiencing injuries to their face or have experienced weight gain or loss of greater than 20 pounds need to recomplete their fit testing in order to ensure their respirator continues to fit properly. A copy of your fit test record needs to be provided to the CERF's unit training manager so that it can be updated in the training tracker and saved for inspections. Your respirator is one of the most important tools to keeping you safe during a CERF response. It may mean the difference between successfully completing the mission and permanent injury or illness. It's critical that you're checking your respirator to ensure it's in good working condition. If there are issues such as damage or wear and tear, channel these issues to your logistics team immediately. When you're using your respirator, always perform the user seal checks to make sure your respirator is working properly before you enter the field, and always follow turnback guidance in order to prevent failure of your cartridge and injury to yourself or others. If you have questions, please reach out to your local PAM team.